Hello, and welcome to another episode of NBRI, New Business and Retail Insights from the Center for Retail Studies, Mays Business School, Texas A&M University. I'm your host, Dr. Venki Shankar, Director of Research and Coleman Chair Professor. I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Dr. Donna Hoffman. Donna is the Louis Rosenfeld Distinguished Scholar and Professor of Marketing at the George Washington School of Business in Washington, D.C. She's an internationally recognized academic and sought-after industry speaker in the areas of social media, online consumer behavior, and digital marketing trends. She's worked with major companies, including Procter & Gamble, Intel, Microsoft, FedEx, and Walmart. She's a member of Procter & Gamble's Digital Advisory Board. She co-founded and co-directed the first academic center for e-commerce in the U.S., I guess in the 1990s, and she's been awarded many of the field's most prestigious research honors, including the Robert B. Clark Educator of the Year Award from the DMEF, the Shet Foundation Journal of Marketing Award for long-term contributions to the discipline of marketing, and the William Odell Journal of Marketing Research Award for long-term research impact. She's also named Distinguished Graduate Alumnus of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Thank you, Donna, for taking your valuable time to join me in this conversation. How have you been amid this challenging times?
Thank you, Venki. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. It's been tough. You know, we had to switch over from regular teaching in the spring semester, like many of us, and then we had to go virtual right around before spring break, and that was pretty intense. And we all made it through. And now I think we're just trying to get used to the new normal.
I just wanted to start out by asking, how would you describe yourself in maybe 5 words or less? I know it is a bit challenging too, but I'm sure you could take a shot at that.
5 words or less.
Right.
I feel like I'm at a crossroads and exploring what might come next. I think this is a time of reflection for a lot of people, and pretty stressful period. And I'm just trying to take the opportunity, since everybody's working from home, to start to figure out, what's going to be my place in this new environment.
But more generally, I was thinking, if somebody was to ask to describe Donna in 5 words, what were the 5 words be? I was thinking of, you would come up with your own 5 words.
I don't know. I think that's really hard. Yeah. What are your 5 words for me?
I don't know. I don't want to mess up. But
that's a good call, Venki.
Good call. I know. It's better. That's why this question is from you to yourself. How would you look upon yourself as that? So, but if you want to think about it and talk about it later, that's fine. Okay. But maybe we could get started from your research journey. And after your PhD in psychometrics, how have you moved along in your research? And just give us a brief glimpse of your research journey.
I think my career has had my research career has had like two pieces. I had my pre-tenure piece where I was a psychometrician by training, and I worked on a lot of methodological research. As you pointed out, some of it was award-winning, and was pretty prominent, but it was very methodological and quantitative. And then in the 90s, when the internet first started to appear, when NSF got out of the backbone business, I was really captivated by that. And because I was tenured at that point, I decided that I really thought it was going to change the world, which was a unique perspective in 1993. And I switched my research, since I was also, I'm a psychometrician, which is behavioral statistician and psychologist. I started to become really interested in the online consumer behavior issues. Like, how would people behave in this new environment? And since then, it's been a 25+ year amazing journey, studying first online consumer behavior with the web, then looking at social media. And now my work is focused on new emerging technologies like Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, and how consumers are going to react in those environments.
It's great. So that's a good snapshot over a period of time. And I still remember the first conference on internet, remember way back in MIT, and
Oh yeah.
when we were together. And so,
Yeah. So
and
long
we've come
ago.
a long way. But
Yes.
yeah, and I
Right.
think you moved from online consumer behavior to social media, which you did a lot of work on. And now, from what I understand, you're looking more at IoT or Internet of Things and also AI. So talk to me a little bit about what you're currently doing. What are your current research interests, and what are some of the issues that you are planning to continue?
Well, so one of the things I think is kind of interesting, which relates to the kind of research trajectory and the evolution of my thinking, is when the internet burst on the scene, I was really excited by that. And I felt an excitement I don't know that I'd ever felt in my professional life. And I kind of rode that wave, from the research perspective. And, as you note, I've worked with a lot of companies and I've done a fair amount of consulting. And, but I think it sort of reached a steady state, and it wasn't really as interesting anymore. It was more on social media marketing and things that were, a lot of people are experts on that. And it's, we're kind of in this sort of rolling along the wave, right? And the wave isn't very choppy. But then when, this idea came out, when it came out, this idea that you could put intelligence into objects. And so some people call that the Internet of Things, but we could think of it more that these are internet connected objects that have intelligence. And so they're powered by AI, but they're connected to the internet. I suddenly felt again this amazing sort of passion reawaken for, oh my God, it's going to be incredible and it's going to change the world.
Right.
And I think this is something many people have begun to realize pretty quickly. I'm certainly not alone in this, but I think there's going to be a rapid transition as we ponder what it means to be in a world where the internet has sort of burst through the walls or sort of the digital and virtual environment and is now in the physical world living with us. So it's in objects, it's in chairs and desks and Coke cans, and it's not just living in our computers. And one example of that is Alexa, Amazon Echo. I have to be careful, I have to whisper, she's sitting right here. But so my research now focuses on things like what will consumers' experiences be in their interactions with these smart objects? And one of, I think, the fundamental things that we've been looking at is this idea that because we have these repeated interactions, like for example, let's take these digital voice assistants, we're talking to them all day long on a regular basis. We set them up to control things. So some of the things are automated. Sometimes they're helping us with things. Sometimes we ask them questions. And what happens in those repeated interactions is we start to form relationships with these devices. And so I'm really interested in the impact of these consumer object relationships. And one aspect of that relationship, which particularly fascinates me, is how these devices can actually be harmful. So how they can reduce us and we can become less than we were. So an example of a project I have with Tom Novak, my spouse and longtime collaborator, and then another collaborator, Christian Hildebrand, who's at St. Gallen in Switzerland, is we're looking at what happens because you have to change your behavior in order for devices like Alexa or Google Home to understand you, because they're not that good at natural language processing yet. And we have to conform our behavior in order to get them to do what we want. And in the process, we can become less than we were before. So I find that really fascinating. And we've, written some conceptual papers, sort of proposing some theories for how to look at consumer experience from these different perspectives. And we spent about 5 years developing these theories and publishing those papers. And now we are squarely in the empirical phase, where we're starting to test a lot of our theories in these different environments. So that's an example of one project. Another project I'm really interested in is where by virtue of these interactions, you can anthropomorphize these devices, right? So you might think they're kind of like people, right? Or human, or they're somehow human. And there is a lot of really interesting work, not at all in marketing, that's suggesting that this anthropomorphism is could be negative. It could be a really bad thing that we start to anthropomorphize artificial intelligence, and it could actually have some harmful consequences. And I am really excited by that idea. And so we've started some projects looking at, would there be other ways we could start to have a perspective of devices which might not lead to as harmful consequences. And so we have some studies looking at how maybe you become too trusting when you think it's like a person, right? As opposed to if you recognize, hey, it's not really a person, right? It's an artificial intelligence, which is not like a human intelligence. And so I'm very tantalized by those kinds of ideas. And so we're doing some computational work with large data sets. We're looking at doing work in the lab, and we're pretty excited about, testing some of these theories empirically.
That's fascinating. Now, the very fact that human-computer interaction is taking a new shape is very interesting, because you've studied this and lots of other people have also looked at this human-computer interaction. But now what you're saying is that the intelligence built in these devices, it takes a totally new angle, perspective itself, because it not only changes the way in which humans use them, but humans also start changing their behavior, right? And
Exactly.
You're concerned about humans'
Right.
self-expressions not being totally realized, not fully realized. Is that
Yes. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And not only not fully realized, but even more than that. So part of it could be I can't really express myself, right? Or be all the things I could be interacting with the device as opposed to my son, say. But also I might have to change my behavior, and the changing the way that I start to behave in order to interact and achieve the outcomes could actually have deleterious consequences. And so, or consequences that aren't even necessarily favorable for me. I think there's a lot of opportunity for marketers to do pretty sleazy things by
manipulating human
absolutely.
behavior. Yeah, is that
Definitely.
what you're thinking about? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. But at the same time, can a marketer use this positively in some sense? What you're saying is that we can dumb down our behavior, or we can even become very different. We won't be utilizing our intellectual capability fully. But can marketer use that in a way to assist consumer decision making in a positive way?
Well, I think there's no question that they could. And I think that in much of our research, we try to propose that that's another option, right? That marketers could take the view that these devices, these smart objects, they actually are entities in their own right. That's been a big theme in our research, and we take a very philosophical bent. And if we think of these as having their own experiences and being entities in their own right, then that implies a different kind of relationship with the object, where we could be partners, for example, right? But I think what happens is marketers tend to see these more in this kind of master-servant relationship, right? Where they're more that, I'm the master, you're my servant. And that is a very limiting kind of view, right, of what the object and I are going to be able to co-create, if you will, together. And it almost precludes this idea of consumption practices that could be more interesting, because it doesn't allow for the idea that, hey, if the object really gets to know me, it might be able to help me be a better me, right? Yeah. And so I think that's kind of could be the promise of something like personalization, a popular marketing buzzword. But I think it tends not to be that way. Instead, you see marketers, like a really good example of kind of negative personalization is like behavioral targeting and ad retargeting, right? Where you click on the shoes and the shoes follow you all over the internet, even though you bought the goddamn shoes, right? So
it's leading to annoyance and irritation.
And privacy violations and kind of this creepy sense of, how much do these things know about me? What are they doing with all that information? Can I trust who's collecting it? So I think there's a whole host of issues, I think, that really have to be unpacked as you start to think about marketers kind of driving these AI devices.
Right. On the same note, marketers have always wondered if IoT, I can enhance efficiency because if different objects, smart objects are talking to each other, I can enhance efficiency. So for example, we can actually uh, order automatically when our refrigerator is out of milk or anything. And those are the kind of ease of use or ease of living. But on the other side of it, you're saying that this, digital assistants are almost developing a relationship with the humans. But what about the concept of using the digital assistant as your kind of negotiator or concierge so that you can become a smarter shopper, right? So
Right.
if we all start using Alexa or Google Home to help us to better shop, is that okay from the development of the shopper, or is that still might leave a lot of deleterious effect, as you called it?
No, I think there's a lot of, I mean, I think it sounds great in theory, right? But then I think
Okay,
there's a lot of opportunities for manipulation. So like
right,
one example could be, if you have, let's say, the Alexa assistants all over your home, and then of course you're on Amazon Prime and you're shopping on Amazon all the time, all this stuff is potentially connected.
right,
And then it's pretty easy to say, and in fact, Amazon lets you do this. If you want, you could say, I don't want to say it because she might do it, reorder the paper towels or something
right,
like that, right? And you might say, okay, that sounds great. Just like, Alexa,
right,
get me more paper towels. But then the problem is, just think about the ways that consumers shop, even for something that you might think is a low involvement product like paper towels. Well, how many do I need? And maybe I want to see if there's anything on special, and maybe there's a different kind. And maybe I want the ones with color this time and not just the plain white. And so it's taking out, I think, a lot of these aspects of choice,
right,
which in some cases, like it might reorder the towels, but how do I know what price it's offering me? Right? It could just totally take advantage of me and just, not give
right.
me a good deal. And then I can't read any reviews. And I think there's this element of trust there that becomes really important. So I don't think we're there yet for these efficiencies that you're suggesting, are kind of a holy grail of make my life easier, like from the Jetsons, right? Where,
Right.
the robot just kind of takes care of everything.
Right, but we are still a ways away from that.
Oh, wait, a long ways,
Right,
a very, very long way. Yeah.
ways away. But if you think about it, you brought a very important issue, it's privacy, which we've not been discussing that in great depth
Mhm.
in many of the conversations. What do you think, where are we going down in the privacy journey now? We know that GDPR came into existence, the California law has come in existence. What else happens after that?
That's a really good question. I think we're at this kind of interesting point where I don't think consumers are recognize how much information is being collected, like about by having these devices in their homes. Some people do, like, and they already, maybe people put stickies over their cameras on their laptops, right? So there's some recognition of that.
Right.
But I think people are kind of used to this idea that, they go on Facebook or these other social media platforms, and they maybe don't care how
Right.
much data is being triangulated and scraped and collected about them. But I think and then we only see the consequences when there's these really obvious privacy breaches, right? Which pop up, and there's a lot of talk about them, and then they kind of fall away. And I think the same thing is starting to happen in the AI IoT space, where we've had some well-known privacy breaches, like people hacking nanny cams, right, and talking to the babies, and that's pretty creepy. And there's people hacking Ring cameras on the doorbells and that sort of thing. So I think that there's an awareness that there's a potential for privacy violations, but we're in this interesting paradox where consumers are willing, for the most part, to trade off these concerns in exchange for what they perceive as the security and the comfort of having the camera, for example, or having the digital assistant know all these things about your behavior. And that somehow in that calculus, that's been worth it.
Okay, so you mentioned the security and the ability to watch over things. But in the past, when marketers have deluged consumers and even breached some of their privacy, consumers have accepted it so long as they're getting a good deal. So do you think the consumers are still okay so long as they're getting a good deal? They're willing to forget about privacy issues, or you think that's changing with the millennials?
Well, I
and
think,
the
I mean, I think, as I
Gen
said,
Zs?
the good deal is couched a little bit differently, because now we're into this realm of interacting with smart objects where we have
Right.
these relationships, right? And so it's not so much this one-off, okay, I'll give you my email in exchange for a coupon, right?
Right.
So this is instead, okay, I will let you into my home and just stream, kind of vacuum up everything about my personal life in exchange for this relationship while you kind of protect me, right?
Okay.
So that could be through the cameras, or through turning my lights off and on, or managing my Nest thermostat, or just in general kind of, we have this relationship now where you manage my life, or these aspects of my life, and in exchange, I kind of open the kimono, right, to how I live.
But
And I think at this point,
yeah,
people are willing to do that. Yeah.
For that, you have to have a trusting relationship with the firm behind these bots or smart objects, right?
Right. Right.
It's so many people use Amazon Echo mainly because they're kind of invested with Amazon for a very long time,
Right.
and they trust them, right?
Right.
But then there's
Or I don't know how much they trust them, but they're so, let's just say they're so, it's a cognitive lock-in problem, right? From just from, older research from behavioral decision theory. I mean, we're just too invested at this point, right?
Right.
And so
To back out,
it's just too hard to get out, and the benefits are worth what I'm getting. And maybe I just kind of, okay, maybe there's some privacy issues, but maybe I'm not going to look too carefully.
Okay. So where do you see in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe even longer, are these the bigger issues that marketers have to grapple with, or firms in general? Because AI is bringing its own set of host of these unintended consequences. So
I actually think the bigger issue, so this is another thing that we've become really interested in, and so I haven't specifically done any research on this, but I'm sure that I will, because I'm really fascinated by this and I've been reading a lot about it. I think even bigger than privacy is the issue of AI bias. And so I think that AI bias and ethics, and I think this has become even more prominent with the rise of the Black Lives Matters movement, because it isn't a secret that many machine learning algorithms are biased. And we've known that like for years, right? Because they're trained on biased data sets, and there have been really well publicized examples of Blacks are more likely to be, to be predicted to reoffend. It's harder to recognize Black faces, for example, because of the way they're trained on the databases. And there are lots of these examples. Plus, there's gender bias. Women, Amazon has had to knock off its resume AI program because it wasn't recommending women for jobs because of the resumes it's trained on, and so on. So there's tons of these examples. Like, there's a lot of these. And in fact, I'm so fascinated by this. I'm teaching a new course for GW on AI strategy next spring, where a third of my class, it will be devoted to looking at these social problems that are being raised by AI, because I think that they are, they're interwoven with the business problems, right? Because if you're using an AI algorithm to predict something, and that prediction is based on flawed training data, then you're screwed, right? And so, and many of these algorithms now we know are disadvantaging people, and they're unfair, and they're biased, and they're harmful to society. So I think in the future, that is going to be the really big issue. And so, for example, facial recognition programs, which many people have been saying, we need to shut those down. They're not fair, right? And that wasn't really getting any traction. And as soon as the Black Lives Matter movement exploded, this spring, we got a lot more traction on that. And many companies have said, okay, we're going to shut that program down. They haven't all said that, but many have said, we recognize this is not fair. It's discriminatory, right? So I think the social issues and these implications of these smart object consumer relationships, they are going to be one of the defining issues of the next 5 to 10 years.
I'm glad that you're researching or starting to research that, because bias and fairness have always been a major concern in AI, and we as marketers, as the marketing research community, have not paid enough attention. I know computer science has a subfield that looks into it, but we still are at the really early stages of that research. I guess we really need more research and more changes in the policies too, right?
Yeah, and not only that. I mean, I'm glad you recognize that. But like, I think we have a responsibility, right, at the level of the journals, because I'm an AE for a number of journals, and I'm co-editing a special issue of Journal of Marketing on new technologies in marketing, and so I'm a gatekeeper, right, in that respect. And what sort of surprises me is I'm often the only voice saying, well, what about the bias issues, or what about the ethics?
Right.
A lot of papers are coming through the transom on AI algorithms, right, from the marketing perspective, and there's almost no recognition that I'm seeing on the editorial side yet of hey, there could be bias here, right? I mean, we should be addressing that. So I think we have to recognize that. I'm
glad you're championing the cause there. But for businesses and entrepreneurs, what kind of opportunities are there for them to be conscious of this bias, conscious of being fair, and what can they do better or different, knowing fully well that there's this bias and unfairness that exists?
Well, I think there's two ways. I mean, there are on the one hand, there's the data that the algorithm is being trained on, right? So that can be examined. And that is there, as you said, there are a number of interesting streams of research in the computer science literature, and even in the NLP, the natural language processing literature, that are looking at these issues, because text itself is discriminatory, right? The way language is used captures racism, sexism, misogyny, you name it, right? So I think that we can, on the one hand, recognize that some of it is coming from the data itself, but then some of it is also coming from the algorithm. And so I think part of the problem is a lot of marketers aren't going to be trained technically, but that doesn't mean that we can't educate them to raise these questions. Right? Good, when somebody's applying an algorithm, like a prediction algorithm, to predict sales, we need to look under the hood a little bit and make sure we understand, is it targeting the right people? Is it putting out the right segments, and so on? That's
an excellent point. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's also, even for the AI to get the right training data, you need to have some policies that actually are inclusive.
Exactly.
And so we also have to advise the businesses not to consciously be more inclusive, so that there's some data after they take the decision, so that these biases can be corrected.
But I think what happens is, but I think this gets back then to issues of like, it's not a company, it's people, right? It's people at a company. Like, so when Amazon develops an algorithm to sift through resumes, and that algorithm turns out to be wildly gender biased, it's not, is it the algorithm's fault, or was it the white men who programmed it without thinking? Maybe we should include other kinds of resumes.
So that's another good advice. So this is fascinating. You've shared a lot about what's more important issues for the future. Let's turn a little bit towards some other aspects of you, which is, what are some of the things that you do for fun? Let's say.
So we're not coming back to the 5 words, right?
Well, if you have the 5 words or less, I'm still interested in hearing that.
I don't know. So for fun, I don't. fun is kind of weird because I feel like I'm not sure anyone is really having fun, right? It's very like I know I'm pretty stressed about what
Okay, not
I see
right
on the
now, but
news.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So but I will say I'm doing a lot of reading and I'm
Okay, good.
really enjoying. I mean, so you save a lot of time not traveling, right? So, so for fun, I travel, right? Like you, we travel all over the world. We give
Right.
talks. Spend a lot of time on airplanes, especially in the summer. This is kind of our peak conference time, and you have to mourn that, right? There's this sort of grief you have to go through, but then at the same time, there's an enormous amount of time that has been freed up, and so I'm reading a lot of books.
Excellent.
And I'm reading books.
What are some of the books that you're reading?
So the books I'm reading, which are related to that what I hope will be my next research area, are related to these issues of AI. So like these different perspectives of AI, because there's tons of books and classes on how to do AI, right? Like how to build a machine learning model and how to program, a neural network model. Those are fine, and I've taken those online courses. But I'm much more interested in the deeper philosophical issues of what will be the impact of AI on us as humans and society. So I'm reading like Nick Bostrom's book on superintelligence. I'm reading Gary Marcus's book on rebooting AI. I'm reading Pedro Domingo's book on the master algorithm. And then I'm also reading these books because I'm really interested in bias on Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Neill. That's a fantastic book. And then Invisible Woman by Carolyn Credo Perez. She has an amazing book on how the kind of data that we collect and don't collect, that can influence policies in society. So I think those different kinds of books, and AI Superpowers is another really good book. So I'm kind of reading sort of juggling all of these, trying to sort of get a picture of these different ways that we can see AI, because AI is created by humans, and it's been built on these models based on what we think is happening in the brain, right? It's sort of modeled off this idea of neural networks and neurons connecting to each other and things like that. And I think that there's a lot of debate in the computer science literature about what's going to lead us to AGI, artificial general intelligence. And part of that debate is that it may not be these deep learning models. We're kind of maybe going to hit a wall. We've had this renaissance in AI because of these neural network models. But I think there's this sense that may not get us to this next level, and we might need another perspective.
Because that's also related to the way in which our human brain works. It's a little bit more holistic than just these brute force deep learning and networks are. So,
and those deep learning networks are great. I mean, they've been really good. They are better than humans at some very specific tasks, right? Very narrow tasks, right? But if we really want to build, these robots that we are going to really interact with, I don't think neural networks are going to get us there.
So from a AI safety point of view, you're less worried about this, doomsday scenarios that some of these people are talking about.
I'm a big Ray Kurzweil fan, and so I'm pretty convinced the singularity is around the corner. I just don't know if the corner is 30 years from now or or what. But I totally expect. I believe it's inevitable that we will have a self-replicating AI, right? That is the definition of the singularity, and that AI will be able to self-reproduce. I don't know.
But will there be a merging of human and?
Well, that's a separate topic, like this transhumanism, perspective, and like the Elon Musk view of we better join forces because we're doomed otherwise. I'm not sure that's. I think there are definitely going to be some people who are going to embed themselves with all this tech, but I think that's fringe. I don't think that's going to be most people. That's my view there, except in some limited sense, like a new eye, new heart, new hand, but maybe not a new brain. But I think whether it becomes this Skynet version where they then take over and kill us is up to us, right?
Right. Okay. Well, you have some optimism there, whether we can influence that to a certain degree. But anyway, we're coming toward the end.
Okay.
I would like you to think a little, and then, if you have any messages or anything to say to all the people right now amid this very challenging times, what should students, businesses, managers, entrepreneurs, what should they be doing now or differently, and what can they be doing? Even public policy or administration officials, what can they be doing that can change the way we evolve?
I think right now, the most immediate thing anyone can do is wear a mask.
Okay, thanks.
Model that behavior, wear a mask, and let's hope we get out of this sooner rather than later.
That's well said in terms of safety perspective. But is there anything that from a point of view of, let's say, learning, what can people be doing differently to prepare themselves for the future?
Oh, I think it's, well, one thing I tell my students, and so we're in marketing, right? But I think it's really important. The more quantitative training you have, the better. Okay. You cannot have too much quantitative data science, statistics, computer science training. I think it's critical. It's the future. The future is data driven, and somebody's got to analyze that data and understand it. So that is my advice.
And you would suggest the same for also executives or managers trying to reshape their skills and retrain themselves.
Absolutely.
Too, right?
Definitely.
Because right now there's a lot of unemployment, as you know, at all levels. Unfortunately,
right.
A lot of people have been affected at the lower levels, but still they may want to retrain themselves. So this is a good opportunities for educational institutions.
Huge.
Right?
Yeah. And not only that, even for self-training. I mean, people who have the luxury of being able to work from home, right? Which is not all of us. Right. But if you are at home and you have the luxury of, maybe you don't have to take care of little children, so that's also not all of us. Like, if you have these luxuries and you're privileged in that way, then I think there are so many opportunities for online training, which are phenomenal. I mean, they're just phenomenal courses from Stanford and MIT and the top institutions over the globe. And
that is true free. For even your institution, our Mays Business School, Texas A&M. We are offering a lot of options now for students and practitioners to enhance their skills, enhance their learning and knowledge. And that's a great,
right. And if you're interested, I mean, you can get these as one-offs, right? So you could take a course, but if you're interested, many schools now have these online programs. You can get certificates. We offer them. You probably offer them. You can get a full-fledged degree. So I think there are huge numbers of opportunities, and it's not that painful, right, to retool.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that message, because that resonates well with a lot of us here as well. But it's been simply superb listening to you, Donna, share your insights, because
thanks, Venki.
It is very important at this time for a lot of us to understand where these future is going to be, where the current cutting edge research is. And thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And good luck with the rest of your research, and hope to keep in touch with you, and hope to have you back sometime. Back in this show. And keep safe.
Thank you.
Keep safe, and good to see you without the mask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.